So you know it's not a crime to be fascinated by all things criminal. And if you do like delving into the underworld, why not join us for a special live show on March 27th at the Cork Opera House. We'll be talking about the making of a cartel and all the wild and crazy stories that happened along the way. So why not join us for this special live show? Tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie.
Every week we get rebuilt like 70 times. Journalist black, Nicola talent, journalist rap, unlimited habit. Me and Nick Cairo selling out Whelan's back in December. Did it with habit, chilling with Boyd, chilling with talent. I don't want Boyd, I give it to Alan.
Who is it?
Don't know. Journalist rap.
Like Nicola Talent?
Like Nicola Talent. Yeah. So I'm in a song. I'm not sure I've heard that anywhere except there. Is it in the charts?
I don't. Do the charts even exist, Nicola, anymore? You know?
Yeah.
They do.
So where did you guys find that? Sugaboo.
It's called Numbers with a Z by Sugaboo.
And who's Sugaboo?
Some rapper from Kimmage.
A rapper from Kimmage. Okay, so that was the first question. Does Nicola realise that she features in a song? She does now?
She does now.
It's a good song.
Is it? Yeah. It's one of your you're all over this
very
stuff, are you?
Good tune, sort of catchy, isn't it?
Very catchy, Nicola.
Yeah. You gel?
No, I totally,
I'd
absolutely.
Say you were so jealous.
Yeah, so you've become a part of the cultural ether of the country, haven't you?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, we're only a few steps away. Celebrity traitors, I think.
Celebrity traitors.
Like that, it's inevitable that you're going to end up...
I would be so useless at that thing.
I don't know.
Can you imagine?
I don't know.
I'd just sort of lose my concentration and... Wouldn't I?
Well, I think so. Well, I prefer to see on that than Strictly Come Dancing or whatever. So, but you're inevitably going to end up on one of them.
Now, Q&A. So, listeners and viewers have been sending in their questions, and as usual, they're a mishmash of, I suppose,
deeply personal. Which ones which you're going to ignore for the most part?
Yeah, there's a lot of quite personal stuff there anyway that we will just mostly ignore. First question we have in is, what was the stupidest crime/criminal you've reported on? So I have something that I recall for that, but will I tell you my one?
Go on, go for it.
I actually think this was headlined as being, this guy was headlined as being such a stupid criminal. So it was around 2013 or thereabouts, and this guy, Gary Byrne, he was 30, and he was involved in this sort of armed robbery in Dublin.
Yeah.
And what had happened was it was a gold storage business on Bolton Street.
Yeah.
And himself and two others had broken in to this sort of lockup, basically. So Byrne left the scene of the robbery, making his getaway, and pulled down the shutters behind him and locked the lockup. I suppose to give himself time, or to give the gang time to get away, that nobody would notice that it was open, that it had been broken into. And the hope was that they'd be well gone by the time it was discovered that the place had been robbed. But one big mistake he made was that he locked his two accomplices in.
Yes.
Right? Ian Jordan and Aidan Murphy found themselves trapped inside with two staff members they had been gagged during it. So they tried to escape through the ceiling tiles. They tried to knock a hole in the walls. So they ended up trapped, like his accomplices, and off he went, running like Forrest Gump, never to turn back. And when the fire crews eventually came along, they had to cut a hole in the shutter to free those inside, including the innocent staff members and the two lads whose accomplice had managed to...
What a genius.
So Gary Byrne was sentenced to 7 years in prison. He was found guilty of attempted robbery, possession of an imitation firearm, and 2 counts of false imprisonment at the Bullion Rooms, Bolton Street, Dublin. And that was actually 2010. I think it must have been about 2012-13 when it came to trial. But it was definitely sort of amusing.
Well, I'm going to give you, there's a couple, but I'm going to give an honourable mention to the recently jailed Mr. Flashy Glenn Ward.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to give him an honourable mention, him and his brother Eric O'Driscoll, because, like, we're reporting on these as, up-and-coming drug lords, top of the game, the most feared and, referred to criminals in the state. But, like, ultimately, they're behind bars now and their days are over. They're persona non grata because they took a video of themselves firing weapons into the air and left it on their phone. And I mean, if you hear the evidence of it, actually, video footage retrieved from a phone showed Ward having already fired the gun, encouraging his younger brother, Eric O'Driscoll, to take and discharge the firearm because basically they were at a party. They fired a semi-automatic rifle into the air from the back door of the party, recorded themselves on it. Then they were in a taxi. Somebody tried to kill them. They left the phone. And that is the end.
That's why they're in jail, because they sort of like videoed themselves doing...
100%. I mean, that is it. The gun was seized separately, but the connection comes from their own hands. And it was huge effects because the gang that they had around them was effectively dismantled. But one of my own favourite ones was, and this story was another one that went all the way around the world in 2020. So there was a young guy, Darren Barnwell was his name, from Dublin 7, from Blackhall Parade. And he was a drugs courier, and not a small one. He had a bag with 40,000 euros worth of cocaine in it. And he lost the bag. He got in a state of panic after he got off a train and realised he'd left the cocaine in the bag on the train. Then he tried to get back on the train, or he tried to get back through the thing. He got in a fight with security staff who wouldn't let him back on to look for his bag of 40,000 words of cocaine. So eventually he got totally pissed off and he rang the guards to report that he'd lost his bag. And then he remembered he'd gone into a shop in a nearby. He'd might have left the bag there. He returned to the shop, found his bag, which had been found by staff in the meantime, and they hadn't looked at the contents. So then the guards had stopped them in a panic outside the shop, and when they opened up the bag, they found the cocaine in it.
Absolutely. I mean, class. Listen, no question about along these lines about stupid criminals could possibly go without us referring to the post office and the famous events that happened in Carlow when Gareth Coakley and Declan Hockney attempted to claim the pension of a dead man after they dragged his body upright into the post office and tried to claim the money. I mean, obviously there's the late Pater Doyle, who was 66. I'm sure his family don't find it terribly funny, but I do think that the image of the two of them propping up the man and bringing him into the pension. Of course, they were all drinking together, and Pater Doyle passed away, and they decided that before, I suppose, they had to report his death, they would just try and claim his last pension that he was due.
Like, they did an interview with us, of course, before they were charged, because ultimately they were convicted of, I think it's the offence is deception. But before they were charged and after it had emerged that this had happened, they did an interview, and it was brilliant actually with Patrick O'Connell, who's often on this podcast for us, and he basically, the excuse was, well, he just dropped dead just sometime around they were pushing him past the ice cream place.
So he was grand until they practically approached the counter.
He wasn't in great nick.
Yeah.
He literally passed at that moment, and and then he said he'd been looking after him all his life and all of this, and but I mean, and of course then the reaction to it, as you said, it's different for the family, of course. But then, do you remember the St. Paddy's Day floats? It must have happened around St. Paddy's Day.
Oh, right.
Do you remember the St. Paddy's Day floats and on all of that? Like,
it was on a Paddy's Day float. Oh, do you remember those Paddy's Day floats?
Yes.
Where were they? Were they up around that area?
Well, they're somewhere in the Midlands. They do them every year.
And there's a family that do something absolutely crazy every year.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So they did that.
Yeah, but I mean, again, look, it's it's just the sight of the two guys, pushing them in,
Anyway, so there's some of the most sort of the stupidest crimes and criminals that we've reported on. There's many, many more. And in actual fact, they're the stories that lighten the load a little bit when it comes to crime reporting, isn't it?
Well, 100%. I mean, and I suppose some of the reason why people like crime reporting is because it shows people at their most raw. I mean, I think that is probably why people have an interest in reading and hearing about crime, because you hear people behaving in a manner, maybe reacting in extreme violence and anger that people can relate to, even if they've never gone that far. But there's also those moments where people make these incredibly stupid decisions to try and make a few quid, and it goes horribly wrong for them.
Now, the next question relates to, could we do a podcast on Leon Riley from Cork? So initially I didn't kind of quite remember that. I thought it was maybe something that happened in recent weeks and or, before Christmas when I was off in a miss. But it's actually something that came up in 2022. And he's a guy from Cork who was part of a drug trafficking outfit. They tried to smuggle €50 million worth of MDMA into the UK by hiding it in a digger. But they were caught because of Encrochat. He's one of the many people that has fallen due to Encrochat, and he's serving a very lengthy period in jail in the UK now. But he basically was caught because he took a photograph of his television set and sent it to a friend. And of course, his image was reflected in the television set. But the whole operation seemed to have been blown, or certainly the police managed to work out who were on these Encrochat handles. But one of them accidentally shared a photo of his pet dog, which showed personal...
What's the name of the dog?
The dog is called Bob.
Bob.
Right?
Yes.
And Bob, was it his number and his owner's...
He had a little collar, a little thing on his collar. If you find Bob, please phone this number.
Yeah. So that was enough that they had caught them. Now, there's a further question with that regarding to Encrochat. Where are we?
Do you know what it does show, that case? What? Leon Riley, like, he's some guy, he's from Cork, like, he's not just one of these guys that are loosely linked. And that's one of the things that Encrochat exposed. Like, Leon Riley was one of these guys whose name was out there the whole time. And Encrochat revealed these figures that were really quite at the top of the criminal underworld and who'd never really been known. It was a huge plot. I think it was a record at the time. And the MDMA was being brought in one of these excavators. Again, these huge pieces of equipment that we would see mimicked in the Nathan MacDonald case again with the crystal meth. The Encrochat exposed all of these guys. So, and
the next question relates to Encrochat. What is the current state of play here with Encrochat? How many convictions have there been, and is it sort of finished? Actually, no, it's not. We're still seeing people come before the courts on Encrochat. Here, as has been my mantra, we haven't seen anybody yet before the courts on Encrochat because we haven't used it in a court of law. But I think in the north, there's been a huge amount of success. Mostly guilty pleas on the Encrochat.
Again, you're seeing... But, in the north where people are being offered these, that the state will accept a guilty plea for a certain charge. And now there's a huge incentive for these people because you're talking about a 50% reduction. And most of the major criminal figures who have come before the courts in the north have pled guilty. Now, the Encrochat hack, we've yet to see it being used as primary evidence in Ireland to make a conviction, though it has appeared in some extradition cases. They have been referred to, but it's some of
the last person that we have seen before the courts is there's an outfit in the north called the Firm. Which we actually need to do a totally separate podcast on, and we probably also need to do a totally separate podcast on all the people who have been convicted in relation to Encrochat and what their handles are, so as we have a kind of an idea of which groupings, and who will all have associates, by the way, with with
I mean, a
people
lot of the drugs
operations down here, particular the firm, which Darren McConville, who's the latest person to expect jail after pleading guilty to 20 offences due to this Encrochat sting. Like, the firm would be closely linked to the big organisation, Mr. Big, firm associates there. So let's just have a look at this, because this is the most recent one. So Darren McConville is considered to be one of the biggest dealers in the country and a supplier to the firm crime cartel. Now, he has been warned already to expect jail after pleading guilty to these 20 offences, which include cocaine dealing, conspiracy to murder, organising cannabis grows, and money laundering offences. All very serious. He's 48 and he's a key associate of a guy called Jeffrey Jed McLean, who's also from County Armagh, and another individual known to have supplied the firm with cocaine. They were both on the Encrochat hack. Let me see if I can see what their handles were, because of course when they plead guilty, they're actually pleading guilty to the handle, which is then creating a picture of who's who, because the handles are coming up in other cases.
They are.
And in other investigations. And what you have in the UK is, and you saw it in a very good documentary in regards to it, when you identify one, it's almost a mathematical thing. You have this kind of network of phones talking to one another under handles. And you identify who one person is, and all of a sudden the jigsaw starts coming together, who the other person is. So McConville, and we will come back and we will have a look at the handles, as I said, and we'll put them all together in a separate episode and probably a separate piece for the crimeworld.com site. But he's the latest. There have been, individuals, very well-known individuals, including Michael McLaughlin, who's originally from Galway and who was caught he was actually the first person who was charged in relation to those gangland laws, that gangland legislation, which is now being used all the time. He has pleaded guilty to Encrochat, as has Paddy O'Connor, there's any amount of them. I'm going to go back and have a look at it, and I think there's about 20 cases gone through the court in the north alone relating to Encrochat. We've obviously seen in more recent times the Bomber Kavanagh network were all using Encrochat. Pater Keating was using Encrochat. He was extradited to the UK and is back serving out his sentence here in Ireland for directing a criminal organisation. Never faced any evidence or charges here as regards the Encrochat handle he used. But
one of the interesting bits is the Sky ECC hack, which was a separate hack of a separate network. There's now been a couple of successful challenges against that. This in the last few weeks. One of them in Spain, which was a very significant ruling, a 44-page ruling, where people were acquitted on the basis that there was unreliable information about the background details of the hack, and a separate one in a very important case in Antwerp involving one of the major drug traffickers who was extradited from Dubai, where the court said they didn't have enough details of the underlying methodology used. So you do wonder, will all of these guys who've pled guilty, because even if it's ultimately proven now that, for example, Encrochat, it was wrongly hacked or whatever, they've pled guilty.
Well, that's the thing about it.
They don't get to appeal it.
I mean, that's of course it, and it's the same in the UK. Like, there's been hundreds and hundreds of people that have gone through the system and have pleaded guilty to crimes which have nothing to do with having an Encrochat handle. They're to do with drug dealing. A lot of them were caught red-handed though as well, because of the information on Encrochat. So it's complex. But the current state of play here, really, which is what the question is in Ireland, is that I do believe there's one case before the Director of Public Prosecutions based on Encrochat evidence. It seems to have been there for about 18 months and hasn't come back with any decision. The more interesting one for us to look at is another encrypted network and charges that have been levelled against a very serious organised crime group in relation to that. Yeah. So that's that one. And of course, my favourite subject is Encrochat, so we will definitely be coming back to that. Now,
will I ask one?
Go ahead.
So this is about the Kinahans.
Right.
Does part of you think that the Kinahans are still out there because monitoring them might be more valuable intelligence versus having them in custody? So this is an ongoing, I suppose, source of fascination about why, the very top of the Kinahan cartel, basically Christie Sr. and his two sons, Daniel and Christie Jr., haven't been brought before the courts when almost everybody around them seems to have ultimately ended up facing prosecution. Now, there's a number of theories around this, and one of them has been that they're informing at such a level, and of course it was always said like MI6 or one of these international secret services that allowed them to become free. But this question obviously focuses on another idea that they're getting so much information off their dealings.
Because of their activities.
Because of their activities. And of course, the other factor with the Kinahans is that they're not, they've attracted the interest of the US, not just because of their drug dealing connections, but their connections with Middle Eastern and possibly, other organizations, maybe like Russian organization intelligence agencies and Middle Eastern sort of terrorist organizations or, state organizations like Iran or Hezbollah.
Well, to answer the question, I don't believe that they're just allowing them carry on regardless to garner intelligence against other groupings that they're working with, buying from, whatever. I think that if you were to have a conspiracy theory about it, you'd have to consider a little bit that they are the only people, the last people standing. I think the truth of the matter is that the United Arab Emirates have been extremely difficult to deal with when it comes to the Kinahan organisation. I think that this has been strung along because they have some form of protection out there, very high up within a very powerful family that obviously run the place. I think the money they brought to the country in the beginning, you can see that they, while Daniel Kinahan has, his narrative is that he doesn't have convictions, which he doesn't. His father, Christopher Kinahan Sr., does have convictions, heavy convictions for heroin trafficking, for money laundering, etc., and has been involved in a corruption probe in Belgium, where he was involved in corruption of some of the highest ranking police ever seen in that country, probably before these hacks that we've just been talking about. But he had convictions and he was welcomed into the country and allowed to set up businesses and buy residences and given his permits and all the rest of it. So I think that shows you that the Emirates welcomed the money the Kinahans brought.
And I think they welcomed the boxing. I think that was a big part of it as well, even more than the money. I think that the connections, the NTK, the ability to put on, make sure fights are staged in that part of the world.
Yeah.
I think all of that was very important. And even just the celebrities, the celebrity boxers and their hangers on. I think all of that was attractive to the...
For sure. So I think really the logical thing is that is why there's, still there. And of course, you look at that European super cartel, which was formed between Daniel Kinahan, Ridwan Taghi, Elrico, Rafael Imperiale and Eden Gassanan. Eden Gassanan is still also in the UAE, which people forget. Like Daniel Kinahan is largely called the last man standing. Now he is there and he's under some sort of house arrest and has been actually arrested and released. Eden Gassanan, he's the head of the Balkan Tito and Dino cartel. But I think that it is also, if you were to have a bit of a conspiracy theory about it, I think I would more so go with the fact that is it possibly high level informing? I don't think I'd think that they were, that international policing were sitting back and allowing them traffic hundreds of millions euro worth of cocaine across the world, deal with cartels from wherever their place of choice is at the time. But I think that, I can understand when people query, have they been informing? Have they got some sort of protection? I can understand the belief in that. I don't actually believe it.
No.
I believe they've protection because of their money and their success or whatever you'd call it.
Yeah.
Their influence in sport, their influence out in the UAE.
And also I do think, to give them the credit of being very, very smart operators.
Mm.
Like we probably heard more in the MV Matthew trial about how these organisations operate from Dubai, and because of the people that went through the courts, and you could, not to go back into it in detail, but you can really see how disciplined the cell structure existed there.
Mm.
And we do know, of course, Sean McGovern is facing charges here. He's been extradited to come before the courts. But really what was said about Sean McGovern was that while Daniel Kinahan would speak to boxers and get involved in all that side of the business, when it came to the drugs business in Dubai, he only spoke to one man, and that one man then spoke to others. So Daniel Kinahan was really protected by that. So I think they have been more disciplined than some of their contemporaries like Taji, who was, continuing to order murders very, right up to the end, was much more less disciplined in his communications, as we've seen. I think, look, we may hear more at some point, but I would personally not believe they're informing to anybody. I think they're at a scale that I don't think that any particular police force would tolerate that at this point.
Yeah. I'll ask you one.
Go on.
This is a little bit more on the personal side of things.
Oh no. Go on.
What? Jesus.
Well, nothing good can come out of
It's
that.
like as if I'd shot you or something.
No, well, nothing good can come out of it. Go on.
Does Niall still have his scumbag runners #jump overs in Guineas?
Yeah.
What's that jump overs in Guineas thing?
But I think I tweeted once when I had a pair of ON Cloud runners, which are kind of, I'm obviously a very young man and quite the
very stylish and
quite the stylish hip sort of youngster dude.
Yeah.
But I did buy these On Cloud runners, kind of white ones.
Yeah.
Do you know
what are you suggesting about them?
Well, I
hope they're not one of our sponsors.
No, we don't have any.
Our advertisers.
We are willing to be no, but I did tweet them, and somebody did suggest.
Oh, someone else suggested, not you.
Suggested that I might be more akin to being used for a jump over in Guineas.
Right.
And for a very distinguished crime reporting footwear type.
So, if you can elegantly do it, can we see what's going on today?
I still have On Clouds, but I've gone
black. With a green stripe and... Did that really hurt?
It wasn't great. It's kind of lost if you're listening on audio, but I did.
If you're listening on audio, he tried to stretch his leg up a little bit, and then when he put it down, he got one of those sort of elderly moments when everything's seized. And
could I take a combo claim now against Crime World, though?
Class action.
Yeah. Nicola and Niall maybe do it.
Yeah. So anyway, but I actually don't think I've ever seen you in a pair of shoes. Do you possess shoes?
I have a pair of shoes, yeah. That I've bought.
To go with your A suit.
With the suit, as it's called. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, those days are kind of gone, aren't they?
They are gone in the office, yeah.
Did you used to wear suits and things like that?
No, but I did wear like trousers and a shirt.
What sort of trousers?
Like,
Chino things or something?
Well,
I can't remember what used to wear. I was only remarking.
Pre-COVID, like.
There's a lot of hipsters in here. In this
like
building, media, like ourselves.
Yeah, like ourselves.
But in this media company, there is a kind of you can wear whatever you goddamn want.
Yeah, but that's only post-COVID.
There's no, is it?
Yeah.
No, I think I imagine Media House was always a bit like that. I'd say
maybe,
it was a little bit,
maybe, but definitely
a little bit more sophisticated than some of the kind of the homegrown companies. Those Belgians and Dutch and everyone were far more.
You're quite the hip and quite up on things happening in the world, aren't you?
What are you going to say now?
I'm going to ask you a question that's been asked of you. Can you do cameos where we can pay for shout-outs? What does that mean?
Can you do cameos? Cameos.
Well, I tell you what cameo
where we can pay. What does that mean?
Well, did you ever see? So there is this.
It's not a sentence that means anything.
There's an app called Cameo.
Right.
Probably like one of the most famous ones is with Nigel Farage, where you pay Nigel Farage like 40 or 50 quid and he'll do a quick video saying,
oh yeah,
hello, hello Nicola Talent, happy birthday, you're 40 years old today or whatever you are.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the famous one where he says Chucky our law.
I did, of course. Didn't Claire Byrne take him to pieces over it?
Yes, or he did. Didn't he welcome, say, happy birthday to Fred and Rose West recently or something like that on Cameo? And I think the guy from, the In-Betweeners, you ever watch that program?
Yeah.
Jay, I think he's become the first multimillionaire.
For the cameos thing?
Yeah, doing them for 50 or 60 quid. So somebody's asking, will you do a shout out on Cameo? Will you put yourself up? Shout out with Nicola Talent?
Still, totally. So does anyone normal do it?
I don't know. Well, if it's not normal, maybe we should get on it.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have the business mind for that. You see, I have done loads of those things for people who just ring me in and ask me, or they text me and say, it's my husband's birthday or my wife's birthday. Would you mind sending it? And I do, because I just, in a million years, I wouldn't be able to charge anyone for something like that. I'd be way too mortified. And also, you'd be a long way from a millionaire if you got 3 asks in or something, wouldn't you?
You would.
Why would you? What would you do?
I can't imagine. I can't imagine I'm going to retire in the proceeds. No, but it's a funny little intervention, because Nigel Farage could potentially be the next.
I suppose it could be funny. So it's like a kind of like a card, but a digital version with some sort of a celebrity type that you might find amusing.
Yes. Maybe after you appear on Celebrity Traitors.
So is Nigel Farage still doing that?
As far as I know, he still does it, yeah.
I'm going to get you one. And he would say
yeah, happy birthday, or, happy anniversary or whatever.
Happy Monday.
Yeah, whatever you pay for, you'll get.
Wow. Okay, so I didn't know that. And what was the question? Because I have to go back to it now. The question was, what?
Can you do cameos where we can pay for shout outs?
No.
But we might do it for free.
We might do it for free, yeah. We're cheap. If you're a crimeworld.com subscriber, you've probably already binged on our latest exclusive podcast series, The Regency 10 Years On, from the hit that changed gangland forever. This 6-part anniversary special revisits that fateful day when David Byrne was shot dead at the Northside Hotel, igniting a bloody feud between the Kinahan and Hutch gangs, one of the deadliest rivalries in Irish history. Here's a taste of the new series, exclusive to crimeworld.com subscribers. So that Friday was one of those really quiet days. I mean, we all knew that Daniel Kinahan was in Dublin for the Clash of the Clans boxing weigh-in. At least we knew he was due into Dublin the next day. That Clash of the Clans bout match had been heavily advertised. But the day itself there was just little going on.
So there was very little happening that day. It's February. It's kind of a quiet enough time for news in general. And Alan Cherry and Ernie Leslie were on the road. They were at another story actually in Finglas.
What was that, do you remember?
Well, it was one of these classic sort of district court stories where a guy had, I think some teenagers had thrown stones at his car and he got out and slapped the teenager. Always great kind of human stories, because some people feel sorry for the teenagers and some people don't. And so Alan had been out there, but the guy had moved on. He'd called out to his house to see if he wanted to talk. He'd moved on, he wasn't there. And we discussed going to the Regency earlier. And I said, look, just go along and see what happens, divert there. We obviously weren't expecting anything. And obviously that point of Alan being there would be the subject of conspiracy, but we'll get into that at a later point.
For sure. So it was a case really that day of, one thing hadn't worked out, so go to the next. But also there was definitely a general sense of, if we could be there, just in case.
Yes, and as you said, to see who was standing beside the Kinahans and who wasn't from that bigger organised crime group. So Alan and Ernie went out. I got a call. I think you got a call almost simultaneously, but I got a call from Alan. I'd spoken to him earlier on the day saying, see what happens. And he phoned me up and said, there's after being a shooting and I think we've got a picture. And I actually went, yeah, very funny. But of course, he stopped me and said, no, I'm serious. We're after, there's some guys come out with a gun, there's shots fired and there's total and utter chaos. And, our first thought is, get yourself safe. I have to admit, my second thought was, I hope they did get good pictures. But, you're still thinking, they have to get safe. I mean, I know you probably got a similar call because Ernie and Alan obviously were in the same Jeep.
And of course, Ernie's the guy taking the photographs,
Yes.
you know, so he's on the phone to me. So I actually had gone for a pizza for lunch and I had come back over to the office and the phone rings and it was Ernie. And I answered and he was panicked on the other end of the phone. Like, I mean, this was real high octane stuff. And he's still trying to take photos. He's trying to tell me what's happened. He's told me he thinks he's got a good one of one of the shooters as they were running from the scene. He was trying to call up the photograph on the back of his camera.
Yeah.
Because it would have taken him a while to get it onto a screen, but he'd also sent it into the office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he was kind of in the middle of doing a number of things. And as I was on the phone to him from memory, the photograph came into the office and we put it up on the big screen. And it was clear to see that this wasn't just one of the shooters as he suspected, but it was two. One of them was dressed as a woman.
Which is, of course, there was also this confusing story about guards coming in with weapons, and obviously we know now that they weren't ERU guys, they were guys dressed as them. But Alan was telling me this, there was talk of these guards, and then obviously there was, you know, the crowd fleeing from the scene. So it was all confusing. But as you said, Ernie had taken a picture of the back of his camera. People will know what the photographer's cameras look like, and they have a little digital screen. You don't see it in great detail, but we knew this is a once-in-a-lifetime photograph has been gotten.
Yeah, as soon as it came in. And of course, you know, look, the newsrooms aren't as busy as they used to be. They used to be very busy, buzzy places with phones ringing everywhere. And it felt like a proper newsroom that day. I remember everybody's phone was going. People were hearing little bits about it. The news was starting to break about it. And of course, we were there sitting in the office with this photo. There's that sort of news sense in you that you want to run this.
Yeah.
And at the time, we weren't putting stuff up online. This would have been held for the paper on the Sunday, and this is a Friday afternoon. We had something really special here. But we also, I think, knew the guards were going to be desperate for that picture because they were two gunmen running from a scene of a crime. So it was a very compromised situation, and there was a bit of arguments going on, and there was voices were raised.
Totally. I mean, because it is complex. I mean, normally the journalism likes to keep itself separate from the Gardaí investigations. So Garda investigations go on and journalism reports on them. But obviously then you're put in this compromising position because you have guys running out visibly with handguns in their hands. And, you know, they're obviously then disappeared into the ether. And you have to have a discussion about what is your civic responsibility in terms of, do you help the guards? You don't want these armed gunmen to run down the street and kill another few people. So it was a complex one, and people were aware straight away that the guards are going to want these pictures and want to use it for their purposes. And we also have our purposes, which is to tell what happened and to report on the news. So there was a conflict straight away.
From my memory, as the afternoon went on and I was talking to contacts and to other people who were involved in crime journalism, etc., it became apparent that there were no guards at the weigh-in. That in actual fact, the guards didn't seem to be there at all. They were called literally by the hotel and had arrived in response to what had already gone on. Of course, David Byrne had been shot dead in the reception of the hotel. We were getting photographs in later in the day, which showed a very shocked-looking Liam Byrne standing outside the hotel, his hands in his pockets, standing beside his cousin Liam Rowe, another significant cartel member. There was no sign of Daniel Kinahan. I was getting calls from people who were telling me that these professional killers had been flown into the country and had already been flown out. There was rumours, there was spin, and also there was the general, I suppose, conversations in regards to, oh my God, what is going to happen next? I mean, all anyone knew for sure was something was going to happen. David Byrne was a very, very senior lieutenant. He was also from criminal royalty from the Byrne family. His brother-in-law is Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. You know, his brother is Liam Byrne, and he's very much at the heart of the Kinahan cartel. We knew from the beginning that this attack had occurred as part of the rivalry between the Kinahan and Hutch factions of what was once the one organisation. And I think everybody was really trying to predict what this might lead to, but nobody could have guessed.
Nobody could have guessed. And of course, those rumours straight away went around. It was straight away focused on the Hutch gang. But at this time, if you remember, while there had been other incidents, for example, an attempted hit on Jerry Hutch in Lanzarote, it wasn't, those incidents weren't always public. People were straight away thinking this isn't the type of normal organised crime operation. They were looking at the weapons, saying, is there a paramilitary organisation involved here? Nobody knew fully. And of course, what people did fear straight away was, no matter what, people knew how big and how powerful the Kinahans had become, and the likelihood of them not striking back was inevitable. That blood was going to flow.
That bit absolutely 100%. But at that very early stage, I recall contacts of mine suggesting that the Hutches were an army. Did they have the backing of the dissidents? Was this going to, were they going to be very heavily armed because of that? They had contacts in the north. It was like as if people were trying to size up how two Premiership teams were going to play against one another. That's what it felt like. You've been listening to an extract from the Regency, 10 years on from the hit that changed gangland forever. Visit crimeworld.com and subscribe to hear the full series now. And you'll also get exclusive access to our other podcast deep dives on the Dapper Don, Christy Kinahan, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, and more.